So now I want to talk very briefly about a couple of ways in which people often see how they're going to pose social enterprises in the hopes that they're going to be able to do something really great through market-based transactions. A prevalent myth is that, first of all, to be sustainable, we really have to become market-based transaction funded. That the only way to really sustain an enterprise. And you hear this a lot when you talk about startups, and they say, well, we'll give you seed money to get started, but we want to see the plan through which you're going to be totally self-sustaining through market-based transactions in 3 or 5 years. Pick your number. I think you can do that some of the time, and that's great, but make sure you do that in a way that doesn't create forces that are going to pull people away from the mission in order to meet that target, because that's a pretty arbitrary target. Where is it written that in order to be a social enterprise, you have to be only market-based transaction funded? Why couldn't you have some other support that was for part of your mission, that was through philanthropy or some other sources? To me, there's nothing intrinsic about that. The question is, what will make us perform best? That's really the design question. How do we organize ourselves so that we're designed as well as possible to create as much social value as we can? That's really the question. So empirically, the challenge is, if you look at it, the most durable organizations actually generally have philanthropic funding, not only market-based transaction funding. A few exclusively market-based transaction organizations last for a while, but relatively few last more than 50 years. Whereas if you look at philanthropically funded organizations, many of them go on for a very long time. Now, a whole other story for another day. That's not always a good thing either. Some of them have lost their way long since, and they're still here with us. So that's a performance problem too. But there's nothing intrinsic about being market-based transaction funded that makes you necessarily better at your mission. That's the key point. And so our challenge is to get those things aligned. One other myth or fantasy I wanted to briefly touch on. One of the things I hear people say often is, I've got this social mission that I want to do, and I know it can't pay for itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a for-profit organization on the side here, and it's going to spin off a bunch of profit, and I'm going to use that profit to fund the other social mission. I think that's a lovely thing if you can do it. I just want people not to underestimate how hard that is. Okay, it is hard enough to run a successful for-profit enterprise that's not trying to do anything else than be a for-profit enterprise. That's what for-profits are supposed to be about. It's about competition. It's about other people coming in and stealing your lunch while you're not looking, because that's what keeps you on your toes. So the for-profit world in a longer-term equilibrium doesn't have very big margins in it. So be careful about the idea that you're going to be able to easily invent some for-profit thing that's going to spin off a bunch of money that you can use to support some other social mission. Much better if you can get the alignment to be tighter from the beginning. If you can get the market-based part of what you're doing to be also directly supporting the mission that you're trying to serve. So this idea, this separate side program rarely works. That's because making profits is actually hard. And here's the key. If you don't really focus on making profits, you're probably not going to do that very well. And if you really do focus on profits, it's probably going to lead you away from the social mission. So be careful about that mixture. Make sure when you're using market-based transactions that they're boosting, they're helping you, they're pushing you, they're keeping you aligned with your actual mission.